And hi, AnneMarie.
Hello. Hi, Sam.
Hi, AnneMarie. How are you doing today?
Good. Fine, thanks. Hello, everyone.
Yes.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Hey, Sumit. Yeah, so we're just going to chat until the top of the hour. We have a few people that are going to be joining us, and as our listeners come in, and otherwise, we should start in just about a minute. So we are kind of starting a little late, but it's all right.
So, AnneMarie, where are you located?
I'm located in the Bay Area in California.
Is it sunny California right now, or is it not so sunny?
It is so sunny, and it's only March 2nd. And although I love the sun, I think we need a little bit more rain.
Yeah, that's right. I know. Yep. You got to fill the aquifers.
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, I know that was a concern as well here in Colorado. I mean, there was some great snow that just came down, and now it's just beautiful outside, and everything is melting so quickly. And it's but water is an important topic, right? Definitely. So, but excited about the conversation today. How to be an impactful HR leader, and especially with all that's going on today. So, really excited about getting into this discussion. So, thanks for joining us, AnneMarie, and sharing your knowledge.
Pleasure. Happy to be here.
All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so I'm going to get ready to start the session here. So I'm going to share my screen. So for those of our listeners out there that unfortunately Jules is not going to be able to join us today. She's on site doing a shoot, and so she'll come. I'll have to muddle my way through the introduction here. So here we go. So I'm going to as we kick things off. So welcome everyone to the People Strategy Forum. We are a mastermind, a place where we're trying to evolve the profession to create those workplaces where people love to be, and so companies can better attract, retain, and motivate their people. So thank you for being here with us today as we are talking about a great topic, how to be a very impactful HR leader. And we have our special guest, AnneMarie. So we'll introduce her in just a bit. But just a few housekeeping things to talk about as we get started. We are multicasting off of into several platforms. Here we use Zoom. So if you happen to be on the Zoom platform, please feel free to use the chat if you have a question. If you are on a different platform, such as LinkedIn or Facebook, Twitter or YouTube, feel free to leave your questions in the comments, and we will definitely get to those as we see those. The People Strategy Forum is it starts off, and when we do our recordings, we do them live, and then about 2 weeks after they get put into our podcast. So please go to our podcast on iTunes or your favorite platform, and see the recordings of People Strategy Forums there, just about on any topic that you wish. So a little bit to start off with, I just mentioned that Jules, our usual moderator, is not with us today. She is working on site. As you might know, she's an actress and a producer, and as well as her own coach, consulting people on how to be their best selves online. But Jules is on site, and so she cannot be with us today. So we'll look forward to seeing her next week on the People Strategy Forum. Some of our other long-term members here, we have Sumit Singla out of India, a very well-established and distinguished consultant that is a people expert. If you were like to hear about anything or as far as that involved with people strategies or how business is done outside the U.S., Sumit is a wonderful resource for that. Also, I'd like to introduce Shar Miller. Shar is a people expert. She's the owner of her own company, several different companies as it is. She's quite the entrepreneur. One was the Rocky Mountain Health Advocates, a very a small company that she's used a lot of these methodologies, such as the TMA method with her company, with her employees there. So she is an expert in the TMA method, as is Sumit. We may have Howard Niswitz join us as well. He works with me on comp team, and so hopefully he'll join us here in not too long. So a little bit about our guest speaker today, AnneMarie Canter. So AnneMarie and I have been friends for quite some time. We worked together at Barclays and BlackRock a long time ago. So and she's aspired to in several different organizations, as you see here, Salesforce.org, Bank of the West, and now X2X. So AnneMarie is a very distinguished HR leader and is going to share some of her knowledge today with us on a special topic of how to be a real business partner in HR. So specifically, how do we make a difference, be more impactful, and show our best selves with our leaders? So AnneMarie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came into the profession?
Sure. Well, I started many, many years ago, and I actually studied nursing in South Africa. And I left to go and do what many young people do, is I went to go and travel. And I really enjoyed being in the UK, and I started looking for work. And I got hired by a rather large company by the name of Lehman Brothers as a recruiter. So, I mean, this was a long time ago. Not everybody listening might be familiar with that name, but most people should. And in those days, you know, it was a really large company with a lot of good talent practices. And in fact, I remember going in for my job, and the night before, somebody saying to me, "Wow, you got a temp job at Lehman Brothers?" And I was like, "Yes, is that a good thing?" So I really got into HR and into my role through recruiting. And we would run these big recruiting programs where we would also onboard and bring people on and develop them over 6 months. It was really a good way. I then, with recruiting, when the markets are great, it's so satisfying, but when the markets are bad, nothing happens, right? So I realized I had to branch out. So I spent basically my first, maybe 10 years or so in financial services in HR. Worked in New York, moved from the UK, moved to New York, and then to San Francisco. And that's where I met you, Sam. And I was still kind of on the recruiting side, but I was trying my best to be this HR business partner, because in those days, being an HR business partner was like the job, right? And it was very hard to get HR people to accept sort of internal people with other HR experience to be in those roles. And a lot of things were mentioned, well, you have no comp experience, you have no talent. Talent was the big thing, talent programs. And so for all of you, when I worked with Sam, we used to create these huge HR calendars that we'd roll out to BGI and BlackRock about what we're doing. And they were wonderful, right? The business loved them. We had all this content and we would deliver them. So eventually I got into an HR business partner role, thank goodness. What I didn't realize was there was a lot of that employee relations side, which in California is a big deal. So, really had to do a lot of learning. I think what I always remembered, though, as a recruiter is to stay close to the business, right? To really understand what they needed and understand their strategy. Because if their recruiters weren't hearing that, then honestly, you wouldn't really last that long. So fast forward, I then decided I needed to get more experience in other parts of financial services, and I moved into a retail bank in California, which was great. And I learned a lot about employee relations and policies and compliance in large banks. Again, wasn't really my sweet spot, but so good for learning. After that, I joined Salesforce as the lead business partner and head of their nonprofit side, which was an incredibly interesting business model, because basically the Salesforce.org was a reseller of the Salesforce product to these huge nonprofits. But it was very much run like Salesforce. So the values of being able to pitch whatever idea you needed to in 3 minutes, regardless, right? Working hard, nonprofits, having passion in the company, knowing what you wanted to do. It was great. It was also exhausting. And I actually left Salesforce after 2.5 years to become a coach. And I did a coaching course for a year. And thankfully, that's where Sam helped me quite a lot, because obviously I needed to do some work on the side. And doing that as well, doing small consulting projects really, again, opened up my almost resume to different companies. Like Sam sent me off to, to the peninsula to do some work with a large family-owned kind of construction company. I mean, I would never have done any work if I hadn't done that consulting piece, which was so great. But then it was time to find a full-time job. And through consulting as well, I managed to find myself where I am today at a company by the name of X2X. And we are a digital media and entertainment company. And I joined at a time where that industry was booming. So completely different to what I've done before. The movie industry was very heavy on content and talent and creativity, but not on software. And Netflix had blown the whole industry up. So I've now been there for 3 years. And it's an amazing place to be. But obviously we have been through 3 years of what I call continual crisis, right? Whether it has been social, health, and now we have what's happening in the Ukraine. It has been another period where I felt I've learned so much, but I've also changed my mindset around HR, and being a leader and a business partner has changed so much that, as I was saying to Sam, as I was trying to prepare last night for this chat, everything that I thought I was going to say 3 weeks ago just didn't make any sense. So anyway, that's my long version of me.
Yeah, the world is changing so quickly, right? 3 weeks ago is now, and now we're thinking about completely different things that are top of the priority list. Yeah. But one of the pieces that I would really love to dive in today is how the crisis management and how to deal with that in HR. But before we get there, I think what you were talking about is HR in a lot of different types of industries and in different companies and so forth. So can you share your experiences with us and our listeners about how a business partner means different things in different organizations, how different organizations utilize that role in certain ways?
Yeah, and I think that it's a great question. And I think this is something that if people are interviewing, or if you are looking to be an HR business partner or to move into an HR business partner role, it's important for you to understand how the company or organization views being an HR business partner. Sam, and the organizations we worked at before, initially at Barclays, an HR business partner, the focus on it was the delivery and implementation of talent and the buildup of that talent and the retention of that talent. And it was very much, Sam and I worked together because we wanted to make sure in the areas that I supported that the rewards were in place to be able to support that business strategy. If I didn't really understand employee relations, or if something went wrong between a manager and employee, that wasn't the worst thing, because I could go to what we call the employee relations department. So we had kind of like centers of excellence, but I was almost delivering what the company needed from HR, right? And then we were acquired by another great company, but completely different culture. It all worked out for HR that we were acquired by this company. We had the same leadership, so that was great. But they wanted their HR business partners to be more about the day-to-day compliance, employee relations, and managing that. And it wasn't that they weren't focusing on talent, but they completely changed that talent model. So all of a sudden, we were going to these 3-day courses in California about performance management and knowing how to do these things. And my boss in New York was not really interested about a great talent plan that I was going to cut. It just wasn't and so we had to, now for me, it was a little bit easier because I was quite new on the HR business partner journey, so I could switch. But I think for those people that were HR business partners that were very, very tied to talent, it was extremely frustrating and hard. Right. So I think I learned that lesson very quickly through that was what I wanted to be, through just really what was happening in the industry then. I then went, when I chose to go to the California Retail Bank, which was really interesting. They were because they were a retail bank, they were even more focused on employee relations, managing exempt, non-exempt employees, managing large groups of employees out in the field. And they had I will say that they had a very conservative culture. So I didn't know that. I just assumed that if I worked for a bank based out of California or based in downtown San Francisco, that it would just be like downtown San Francisco, and it was completely different. And I had ignored the signals, right? So it again, and that was just when I was much younger, really understanding how the company views HR, where the HR leaders sit on that management team, and do they have values and do they talk about it, right? And what you see, what you're seeing now, because we have people are talking more, we have podcasts, we have HR leaders talking more, really trying to hear what they're saying about HR and about people.
That's fascinating. And I did notice that as well. One thing I've noticed about HR and culture is that there's a significant difference between East Coast, West Coast at sometimes. I mean, West Coast is more about that talent centric. What can we do for our people today? How can we attract the best and keep the best and keep them motivated? And then the East Coast, from a large extent, is more on functional excellence and running effectively and so forth. And I know there's exceptions. I'm generalizing, but I thought that was really neat. So Shar, I would love to hear your perspective on, because I know that you're running organizations out of the middle of the country in Colorado. How was that perceived on your side? I mean, what was the drive for an HR business partner in the kind of cultural paradigm that they're in?
Yeah, I've had a lot of experience as an HR business partner. I think that we were growing up, so to speak, over the last, 25 years is what a real HR business partner is. And really trying to understand that an HR business partner, when the word says business partner, that we really needed to understand the business. And oftentimes in the traditional HR sense, it was perceived that the HR person didn't really understand the business, didn't understand operations, finance, all aspects of operations, and that our business acumen really needed to improve. Also, therefore, the relationship with the executive teams of those different entities. So I did work with large companies that had 160,000 employees, for example, really understanding the 14 executives' business needs and really understanding how to align their talent to meet their operational objectives to achieve their initiatives, and also how to orchestrate that. So that's why I knew that I needed to go out and get a master's in talent management and also organizational effectiveness in order to be a more influential and have credible, as you know, we have books out there about this, be a credible activist in the HR business spectrum. So I grew up from just a small HR manager all the way into being a regional director of talent management to really understand that business need. But I had to go through a major learning curve. So I would say really coaching and mentoring our more junior HR business partners from the beginning about really understanding the business and perhaps shadowing those departments and really understanding what their critical needs are is very, very crucial. So that was my learning. Good
point. And so, Sumit, I'd love to hear from you as well, as far as the global aspects of how you've seen other organizations across the globe utilize the business partner function. Is it different than what you've heard described here?
Significantly so, Sam. What I find is it's a very, very underutilized function. And although Dave Ulrich came up with his model somewhere in the mid-90s about HR being a strategic business partner, but I think a lot of HR organizations I've seen, they miss out on all three aspects. So they're neither strategic, nor do they understand business, and they definitely are not credible partners. And it's changing now. But one of the ongoing debates, I think, worldwide has been, why doesn't HR have a seat at the table? Probably because HR has never really made themselves worthy of demanding a seat at the table. So we've always been fetching seats for other people, underselling ourselves, and not really using our business knowledge, or kind of giving into the myth that HR folks do not understand numbers. And I'm sure that's offensive to a lot of us on the call here. We do understand business, we do understand numbers, but the idea is to call a spade. And one of the more recent examples that I have is I was working for this extremely large organization where their India staff is large enough to populate a relatively small city or a medium-sized city in Europe. So they've got that kind of strength. And we were running an employee engagement survey for about a few thousand people. And the survey results said that the engagement score was about 65%. And in my presentation, I wrote that more than 1/3 of our people are not engaged. My boss said that business leaders would not really appreciate such a strong statement. So why don't we flip it the other way and say that nearly 2/3 of our people are engaged? And I told her that's definitely not what I want to say. I want to call it out and say that you're losing people, you're losing great talent because 1/3 of them, 1 out of every 3 people, they're not happy. And that's why we've got a turnover rate of around 20%. So we argued a lot over it. I told her, if you want to present it your way, you go ahead. I'll not be doing the talking. If I'm the one talking, I'll make the presentation and I'll take the consequences in case they choose to really react badly to it. So we had it my way, and thankfully the business partners, the business leaders, they were really, really happy. And in fact, the CEO of the division, he said that I've never really seen HR make such a clear and such a call to action kind of a statement. So you guys always sugarcoat your words, and I have to decipher messaging in there. I think that's one aspect as a function, as a global function, we're improving on. But at least in my part of the world, I see we're still just kind of skimming the surface.
So what do you think, AnneMarie, as far as what business partners can do to have that seat at the table, to be more influential? What are the key things that they should be focusing on first?
Well, I was going to actually say something straight after you were chatting. In one of the companies that I worked at, that I keep on saying it was the gift that kept on giving in terms of my network. When I was hired, I was reporting into the CFO, and I was interviewed by, there was a co-head situation at the top, and I was interviewed by one co-head, but I was reporting into the CFO. And the other leader who was in charge of all the revenue and sales, and I heard his name, it was almost like this mysterious name. He did not talk to me for a year. So there was a lot that needed to be done in the organization, right? It was, walked in, they hadn't had an HR function. So there was plenty to do. And I was also on a steep learning curve, but I was not used to not having, being kind of treated that way. But I just thought to myself, let me knuckle down, let me get the work done so that I can create a good function. And I spent a lot of time figuring out how to add value to that person, what he saw as value. After a year, he walked into my office. He needed something. We were losing people, and we immediately started working together. I didn't say to him, well, hi, you haven't spoken to me for a year. It was almost like, well, okay, let's get going. I will say that we had such a great partnership. He taught me so many things. He basically said to me, after about 2 months of working very closely on a big retention plan, he said, AnneMarie, I just need you to know, I only have 3 minutes. So when you really want something, can you just come in, book time? You can have any time, any slot in my calendar, but I need to know what you need in 3 minutes and why you need it. And that was such a lesson for me to learn, because so many executive leaders only have about 3 to 5 minutes, and you lose them if you go longer than that and you're part of the team. So I think in that case, having patience, right? When you start in, knowing what you've signed up for, knowing what's going on, what you need to work on, proving, getting things right, but also having patience. Like, things don't happen overnight with people and organizations. And I was not a patient person. And it's only been in the last 5 years that I've realized it can take a year or two for leaders to really trust you, but rather let that trust be authentic and real. And I'm using that, I know I use that word a lot, than it just be kind of superficial, because then you're really not going to have an impact.
I like what you said there on patience. It reminds me of I think there was a Warren Buffett quote. I can't recall exactly what it is, but it's something like success flows from the impatient to the patient.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, definitely, I think that that's something that's needed for. I mean, we have to be out of crisis mode to be able to see things and to give solid advice, right?
Yeah.
So, which talking about crisis mode, I mean, what's going on nowadays? I mean, we were just talking a few moments ago about how the world has shifted in priorities just recently. We've had several years of crisis in a pandemic, right? And then now we start seeing the light of day, and then boom. Then we have a bit of instability in parts of the world, and specifically Ukraine. And so when we're dealing with this trauma, this instability, how should a business partner support the organization in these times?
Yeah, another great question that I honestly didn't think I'd be answering that 2 weeks ago. We have a number of, and I'm going to call them colleagues, and this is what's changed for me. And I always think we can all change, right? Just when you think that you kind of know everything, something else happens. If you look at how we work with them, how the resources that they're actually contractors to us, but they have worked in our organization and with us now for over 5 years, highly valued. And they were then in the Ukraine, and we started, everything started bubbling up about 2 weeks ago. And I honestly was sat around the table, the leadership team, what would we do? What's going to happen? And I honestly did not think that the Russians would invade. I just thought that it's another beating of the chest on the global, whatever. And I then I saw what was happening, and I was horrified. But what we decided when we did those initial talks is that it didn't matter whether those people were contractors or employees, they were our colleagues. And we knew them and they knew us, and we would do what we could to support them in partnership with the company that employs them. And the company that employs them has done an incredible job. I mean, sent buses in, we're working on the communication. We also don't want to tire our colleagues out that are trying to move, keep their family safe. It's just unbelievable what they've gone through. So immediately, I think as a business partner, it's realizing that now having the agility to flip to what the business needs. And also people are, especially after what we've been through in the last 3 years, people are the most important part of the organization. You can't do anything without the right and talented people. It doesn't matter where they are, what your employment agreement with them is, there are people and they're your colleagues. And so thinking about what is the best thing that you can do for those people in these situations, and knowing that it could look different is just a place to start. That's all I can say.
Yeah, times of crisis. I mean, there seems to be, through history, right? We've experienced plenty of crises, and it seems like we should be more prepared, right? We should have policies in place. We should be thinking about what needs, something happens that's unexpected. We should march down that road and know what to do. I know I was working with a colleague from the Birches group, and they put together what's called a special measures policy, which is typically around some of those destabilizations that happen in different locations, such as could be hyperinflation or it could be conflict. But it's basically a plan that's in place for when a a company goes through some sort of experience like what's happening in Ukraine, that there's a roadmap of what to do, because often what happens without that roadmap, I mean, leaders they're like deer in the headlights, right? What do we do next? You know? So have you seen policies like that in place in different places, Sumit, as far as in Africa or other parts of the world?
Policies around business continuity, Sam?
Yeah, and crisis management. I mean, when we talk about business continuity, I mean, sometimes that's put in the perspective of, you know, technology aspects, but this is also dealing with people.
Yeah.
So one of the companies I think that does a great job on this front is Accenture. I was working on a project in Mongolia, and there was a minor earthquake in the Siberia region, which was excuse me, about 1,000 kilometers away. And I got a call from the crisis team saying, "Are you okay? Do you need some support?" And they made these calls to all the colleagues who were working in that region. So they were not emails, they were not advisories saying, "We advise you to stay indoors, we advise you to stay safe." It was a personal call saying, "Are you okay?" So all of us obviously felt good about it. Must have taken a lot of logistics to trace down who staffed on what project, where they're traveling to. And the company had about 500,000 people across the globe at that point of time. So it's not like a small startup of 20 people where everyone knows who's working where. So that's one of the things I've seen. Similarly, I think GE has done a lot during COVID times to help people out in crisis and send out special support infrastructure all over the world. Those are the two that come to mind right now.
I know. I just wanted to say, Anna commented on the chat, and I felt like I was going to say the same thing, Anna, because the crisis, the company crisis I've been through, I don't know if a policy on that day would have helped that much. Now, where I think policies and guidelines can help is doing that kind of preparation beforehand. Like, so when you hire managers, you know, for instance, in California, we know we're going to get earthquakes, but, you know, you used to do those drills. So maybe as part of manager training, leader training, you know, doing something around that. But, you know, for me, we are a 210 person company. Focusing too much on a policy, I don't have enough resources for that. But I do think that those drills and doing something in person and going through it really does help people in that first day of crisis or second day of crisis, when really you're almost doing kind of life-saving things.
Yeah.
I think you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry about it. And I agree. The other part of the thought I was talking about as far as policies is making sure that there's mechanisms in place in times of crisis, such as if there's if a war breaks out, or you have hyperinflation, that triggers maybe perhaps a special fund that can be approved to help with relocation expenses, to help with trauma, crisis treatment, things like this that are in place. And so it doesn't need to be constructed. It's something that can be executed upon immediately. So definitely, when we think of policies, we often think of, gosh, this is a bunch of bureaucracy and we don't want to deal with that. That flexibility is critical, right? So I think that's a big piece. So AnneMarie, can you tell us more situations like that where you've helped in times of crisis? I mean, I know that you've had a lot of experience, even all the way back to 9/11, where you started out. And so, can you tell us how you've helped there?
Yeah, and so I was in the US I'd moved from London to New York, and I was in New York for 10 days and in the North Tower of 9/11. And it's so interesting now because my German niece learns about this in history lessons at school and puts up her hand and says, my aunt was in, and I'm like, oh my God, it's a history lesson. And again, I was heading up a recruiting team. I'd called my team in. We were actually based in New Jersey. I'd called my team in to have recruiting kickoffs, and then everything happened. I feel then the most important thing was remaining calm. And I think for HR leaders, when I look at HR leaders, when I hear about HR leaders, it is the HR leaders that can remain calm in a time of crisis. Those are the ones that I would aspire to follow, not necessarily the people that are sometimes the flashiest or the most extroverted. It's the ones that are calm. We really need to have that as an HR leader, because your business leaders are probably not going to be calm. So, I was 30 years old then, so it was a long time ago. So we thankfully safely got out, but the buildings were destroyed. My boss at that time was a wonderful person, had actually done a degree in psychology and ended up just being the head of operations and IT for a department that was 9,000 people. But he brought everything back to psychology. And he said to me that on the day we all lost each other and got evacuated, he managed to get hold of his wife, and he said, I have to get back. We have to set up this hotel. We've got to get the business running. And he said, not just to save the business, but when everybody is safe, they're going to need something to anchor themselves on. And sometimes work can help. And at first I didn't understand that, because I was like, I said, Charlie, you were one of the last people to leave. He was much older than all of us. And he said, no, AnneMarie, in 3 weeks' time, when people have some things to do, even though they're going through their trauma, and we all did. Every single person that worked in the North Shore for years had trauma. I couldn't hear a plane fly above me without my legs would just give up, would go to jelly. I would have to sit down for a year, even though I was carrying on with my life. But I will say his focus on trying to create something to do helped us all through that. And that has stayed with me, ever since then. So I think calmness and obviously thinking about the safety of people, but then how do we carry on is so important for the psychology of people.
Yeah, I think it's maybe even going to the basics of, we just think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Safety and security, those types of things are critical. And I know that in my experience with people that have gone through trauma in the workplace and they've been displaced, one of the things that comes top of mind is, how am I going to support my family? How am I going to do? It's like, I know if I go to work, I'm going to get that paycheck. I know I'm going to be able to provide. Yeah. And so I think those things are, I don't think it's not tone deaf, saying that hey, there's other things that need to be addressed now. I think that flexibility is part of that, being understanding, as we have been, a lot of leaders have been through the COVID crisis, knowing that we're dealing with, people going in a home environment. Mm-hmm. I tell this story to my friends. I have some clients that were in New York and at the start of COVID, and they're all in their spouse and so forth. They're all crammed in this one single room, and everybody's on phone calls, and you hearing back and forth. I've never experienced that, but especially in New York, where you're just back to back in some small apartment. Yeah. That is tough, right? So being understanding and agile, quite critical.
And actually, Sam, back to this ex-boss of mine and mentor, and I'll mention his name because he just really, really was so important in my life as a human and as somebody in HR. And he was a business leader. He said, we have to keep payroll running, right? We have to get payroll, and then we have got to get the business up and running in payroll so that people get paid. That will help. Like if they see, and I was like, oh my God, he's right. Anyway, his name is Charlie Cortez, and he is just, one of my heroes in my life and helped me through that at a very young age.
So in this crisis that you're experiencing now with contractors and your workers and so forth in Ukraine, what are the basic needs that came to mind? You mentioned that you sent in buses and so forth? Is that?
Yeah, so the company that they work for sent in buses. So we immediately, it sounds very basic, created a roster, names, where they were, family. We also have a couple of employees in the UK who had families in the Ukraine as well, and were very concerned. We set that up. We immediately got touch points between us and the company that hires them. Quite a lot of their leaders are out in San Francisco. So immediately figured out who would speak to who and when. And we also sent out very short company Slacks, which would include all our colleagues, regardless of whether they were contractors, FTEs, to say this is what we're doing and when we would update them again. It's very important to our organization to hear from the leadership team, even if it is just 3 or 4 sentences, and then we will update you in 2 days' time. So through that, and it's still a little bit of a struggle, is figuring out where those colleagues and their families are, because a lot of them were moving into different parts of the Ukraine. Also, the other countries on their borders have just opened up, which has been amazing, right? Bring everyone across. You don't have to have a passport. So people are on the move, and they were invaded on Thursday, and it's Tuesday now. So we're trying to firm up where those people are, but partnering with, and again, this is such another important word as an HR person, is partnering, especially in our complex world, right? I work for one company, but that one company has so many partners that we use to run a business, and it's figuring out who to partner with. We also created a Slack channel because we're all more or less still remote. And, you come into the office in the morning and you would talk about it and what you heard. But we've said this Slack channel is to share information on how to help. Some people have houses in Romania or Poland. One thing we did give guidelines to is just be careful of any video content you post on there, because that can be disturbing. And I will say this has, especially for our employees in the UK and in Europe, it's very, very troubling for them, more so than in the US, because it's just on their border, right? So they are feeling another level of stress to what we're feeling. So I think it's the communication and the tracking, those 2 things. And of course, we've said to those colleagues of ours, whatever you need, we will do what we can. If we need to house you in Hungary, if you need workspace, you let us know.
So that's a great point. So you mentioned that, communication often one of the top things almost all the time in all situations.
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Not talking is a problem, right? So we know that for sure. And the next is you mentioned logistics and coordination and partnership. Yeah. And I think that's a natural place where HR has played a critical role in the past. Just knowing what all the different opportunities are across the organization. We have an EAP plan. We have this particular plan in place. We can payroll, so forth, making sure that people are understanding these different elements. And so communicating that seems to be a big piece in what you've done over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. I mean, the other thing is I wanted to mention as well. I think that some guidance. One thing I was reading a SHRM article that was just released. What was it called? The Ukraine war is causing workers severe anxiety. Employers can help, and so so SHRM released this not too long ago. And one of the other pieces that they mentioned in there is doom scrolling. as you mentioned, as we're all part of dealing with trauma, right? Is sometimes if we feel like if we're watching the news or we're going through social media, we have some sort of sense of control over the issue, and often that can spiral into just depression and anxiety, further anxiety and dysfunction. How are you helping your organization with these types of things?
It's hard because social media is such if you think about other crises that I've been through, we didn't have social media like we have nowadays. So all of a sudden we lived through the pandemic, the social justice protests, the death of George Floyd, all of these things that happened, right? Then more than all and definitely in the US, sort of the politicization of whatever, of COVID last year. And then we have this. I mean, because of social media, we have access to so much truth, but also so much access to also not necessarily just misinformation, but almost like that is too much for us to see. But it also is freedom, right? And you don't want to touch on that. So all we try and do is we just try and advise, to be careful about it, especially now with the Ukraine situation. We're like, please just be careful about what you post and what you say, because it can be very, very sensitive. Mm-hmm. But also by opening up these Slack channels, we are giving employees obviously the freedom to discuss and talk. And that's really important. You can't take that away from people, right? Because it's a way that they can then, I think, let go of their stress. But to your point, and just as I've been listening to you talk, Sam, I'm going to dive into doing some more through EAP, maybe having some group sessions in the UK, in Hungary, because in the UK, people want to be in the office, people are going back. And it's so comforting to be able to sit around and talk to people face to face. So we're going to look into doing that probably next week. I think it's just been a little bit too soon to do that. Yeah.
What about, and we have all these, of course, in these situations, there's going to be a lot of viewpoints. And part of the catharsis of getting this out of our system is to talk about it using those Slack channels and so forth. And sometimes it can get out of hand or it can get heated. How do we maintain a psychologically safe workplace and these situations where trauma can go quite out of control?
Yeah, well, it's something we thought about, especially in 2020, which was so stressful. We were all glued to our screens. The pandemic was happening. Then all the fires were happening. Then there was a lot of protests. It was just a very, very difficult year. And we thought about Slack channels and we thought about that. But I feel very strongly the people that we hire and that we work with, they are intelligent people. And I'm going to trust them first to organize themselves on what they're going to talk about. If somebody says something or it gets out of control, thankfully we're small enough for one of us, or the person's manager to reach out, check in and say, and actually just have a discussion about what was posted. If it got out of control, I probably would send out a broader message. But Sam, we never got there. Nobody said anything that completely upset anyone else. People were more upset with us when we didn't come out and talk to them, when we kept quiet because we didn't know what to say, right? That's actually when our employees got frustrated with us. And so far, and I'm probably not answering the question, but I think in today's world, we have to trust, communication is so important. We have to trust that let's go with that first and then handle things on a case-by-case basis.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. There's been so many situations. Sumit, you spoke of a situation during the pandemic where leaders start with not trusting. Yeah. And it causes problems. I think Sumit, there was a situation you were talking about, surveillance of employees at home and so forth.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's that's a BPO operations company which did that. And what they did was they said they would install security cameras at home, and they would also do keyboard monitoring to make sure people were not doom scrolling or doing other stuff on their laptops, and they were actually sitting in front of sitting at their desks while they were supposed to be at work. And of course, the flip side is also that there are people who actually wrote lines of code to just move the mouse or to press some random keys every few seconds to make it sound like they were in front of their computers. But I think there'd be few and far between. So the whole idea is, especially in a crisis, trust is more important than at regular times. And I think that's what differentiates average or poor culture from best in class or leading culture. So when people know that you're there for them and not there to police or monitor them, I think they like to pay back that trust as well. And the small percentage of say 4, 5, 10% who do not value the trust, I mean, good riddance.
Yeah.
Good point. And I know that Shar, you mentioned, I mean, you've spoken many times about the cohesiveness of your organization, and and part of your role as you've led the organization with HR as a heart as part of your credo is communication among your teams. So do you feel like you've done something particular that is very helpful as a HR leader to instill trust and psychological safety and during these times?
Well, I think my real awakening did occur at the beginning of 2020 when all of the epidemic and all of the crisis and all of the concern about the shutdowns were happening. I think it was a real aha at that moment that transparency and communication with our employees about the possibility that emergencies can happen. And I think that with my learning around the TMA method around career mobility is really, really critical in that. So we redesigned our talent structure to where we encouraged our employees to always be thinking about their other gig or their other career if for some reason our company needed to be shut down. So we are in a health industry, and with all of the COVID and all of the health industry regulatory changes and the lack of reimbursements that our physicians and laboratories were getting, also the locations that we were in, so most of our employees were in malls and public spaces, I really spent more time talking about the career mobility. So be prepared for the emergency of there will be a day where we're going to have to reduce staff or lay off staff. And quite transparently, that has happened a couple of times during the last couple of years now. We've had to lay off staff, rehire staff, lay off staff, rehire staff. So we redesigned our the number of hours that our employees are required to work to afford them the opportunity to have maybe a second job or another opportunity or go to school or focus on their families and their kids. And I utilize the one-on-ones to really talk about that other than just our company and our work. We are currently temporarily shut down right now due to the regulatory changes relative to healthcare and reimbursements for doctors and laboratories. And it is all related to COVID. The layoffs that we had to do were extremely painful, although they were far less painful than when I used to have to do layoffs in my traditional HR hat with other big companies, because I constantly talked about career mobility, the fact that the unexpected may happen, emergencies may happen outside of our control. And I feel that my employees respected that because they said, you led with your values, compassion, dignity, and respect always. And our employees were laid off, and they know we'll be reopening in the next couple months. We may lose some of those employees, but that was, I was so grateful to have learned that lesson and be able to prepare my employees for that outcome. And most of them are doing quite well right now.
That's great. I think part of the success that you had as a leader, I mean, just to kind of talk about our sponsor here, TMA, it was you had those critical conversations with them, right? Understanding what their drives are, what they wanted in their career, how they wanted to show up and aspire and show their best selves every day. So that's one thing that the TMA method does help with. They're simple assessments that you can give to your organization and learn more about your people. It's not about it's all based on positive psychology. So there's no negativity in it at all. It's more learning about your people and how they may want to do their best work.
So when I had all my employees go through the TMA and the competency analysis and understanding their drives, their talents, their ambitions, I also paid to have at least all of our leaders have a very updated LinkedIn profile and utilize some of the language around their personality types and their talents for preparation if we did have to lay off employees. And I don't think, I think a lot of times corporations don't even care if an employee has a LinkedIn profile. And oftentimes people just ignore them because they think that their company is going to last forever. Well, not necessarily. So yeah, there's a lot of aspects to TMA that's awesome. Also, there's a tool, free tools such as learning about other companies or other jobs that people can work with. So having those conversations have been very helpful.
Right. Well, I know we've had a great conversation here and we are coming towards the top of the hour. So I do want to acknowledge our speaker for next week, which is Farm to Spaceship, kind of a fun name about a company that specializes in fun. And so next week, they're going to talk to us about how to encourage more connection and have more fun in a remote environment that we're in. So I'm really excited about having them involved. So one thing before we wrap up, that you highlighted on a couple things here about what it takes to be an outstanding business partner, and one is, of course, being that coordinator, that person that can ensure that the business needs are met. And I think the other piece that you mentioned that was really important is knowing that, you know, as a business partner, you are a partner, right? You have clients, those business people you interact with, and when you become valuable to them, you become more important to them, right? If you make them look good, if you make them be a better manager and guide them just like any coach would. Do you have anything that you would add to that?
You know, I think that word coach, which is really important, it was only when I did that coaching course and I took some time away from HR that I realized that I had probably for the last year or two, I hadn't been listening very well, because especially in large companies, you only have a certain amount of time with people, even your leaders. So somebody who walked through the door, I would almost know what they were going to ask me. And in my mind, I had the solution, right? With coaching, and you definitely don't have to do a whole year to learn to understand those things. What coaching really taught me to do was to listen more, like not to already have made the decision in my head or the solution, because I would be missing out on something that was very key that leader or employee was telling me. So I think listening, you know, really listening it's just one of those underrated skills that I think is so important for all of us, regardless of what we do.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, we are wrapping up. So if anybody has any questions for AnneMarie that they would like to drop in the chat, please do so right now. But and as we do that, AnneMarie, I just want to say thank you once again for joining us here and sharing your knowledge, and quite a very important time to hear your experiences and how you're handling with the crisis and the trauma in your organization, and helping people aspire and recover. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Sam and Sean Smith. It was great to meet you.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And you have hopefully see you next week on the People Strategy Forum. Take care.
Thank you, Sam. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.